Top of the morning. Mic check, we good. What's good, my fellow peasants? How you all doing? Just chilling in the home with the Dogos, the awkward ass reflection on the back of the window because I haven't set up a green screen. I'm basically just chilling, and I thought I'd speak to you. It's been a while since I did just a random face-to-face chat video, just chilling and hanging out, and I felt like doing it mostly because it's 30 years. 30 years of Final Fantasy today, at least at the point I'm recording this. Now, I haven't really seen much that Square Enix are doing today for it. You know, it would have been nice to have a stream. I think a fan video came out sort of where they kind of horrifically put the Final Fantasy I shouldn't say horrific, that's shitting over everyone's work. It was like loads of different fans like doing singing or instruments, and they were good, but when they combined into one song it was just like a clashy mess of shit. Basically, I expected something more for the 30 years of Final Fantasy today. No, 7 remake trailer would have been nice, Square. Oh, that would have been nice. But alas, like E3 and TGS and quite a lot since Final Fantasy 15, absolutely fuck all. Absolutely nothing. It's been a funny kind of year. I don't know why I feel like it's drawing to an end. I guess it's because there's not really anything coming between now and the end of December. So it's kind of like the year's over. It's 30 years of Final Fantasy. And I considered doing a review of the year, how it's been. But instead I felt like just doing more of a chilled chat, which is the order. Because on days like this, you'll see the internet, it starts getting awash with top 10 Final Fantasies. What's the history of Final Fantasy? And in this video, I wanted to talk about my history.
Bruh, look at this dude. Wait till you see the. No, 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 no.
My history of Final Fantasy, what a boring ass subject, Pez. Jesus Christ, mate. You couldn't think of something better than that. But I will say, I do think that it is the case that based on what order you played Final Fantasies, it kind of changes who you are, or it kind of builds the kind of Final Fantasy fan that you are. You always know, roughly what kind of fan someone's going to be based on the games they've played. Sort of, was 6 their first, was 4, was 13, was 15 recently, and you can kind of tell what kind of fan they are. You are what you play, and there sure as hell is some evidence. I ain't seen some data on this, so I can't back this up, but I think it was FF Union. They always just do an interview, and I feel like it's in most of the cases your first Final Fantasy is your favorite. I want to talk about what games I played in what order, basically how I came into the series. So I'm going to start with my first one, and it was, I only realised when I was about 15 this was my first Final Fantasy. It was actually Final Fantasy 4. Now I was 10 years old, I'd never really console gamed before. Yep, quite a late bloomer. And I got given someone's old PS1. They were trying to just flog it. The PS2 was out at this point, and I got a big juicy box of games with it, and this had everything in it. Crash Bandicoot, Dino Crisis, Donkey Kong, Mario games, Zelda Ocarina of Time. There's a real nice batch of games, like your classic you could ever hope for PS1 experience. And as I hopped through all these games, Final Fantasy 4, it was one of the games that gripped me. I've got to say, I sunk about 5-6 hours. Now that doesn't sound much, but considering I was just an erratic, overexcited child at this point, like every hour I was trying a new game out. There was probably about over 100 plus games in this box. I wanted to try every single one of them out as soon as I could, and I loved it. I was instantly pulled into the JRPG genre. Instantly, it was medieval high fantasy. I went through the box looking for more fantasy games, and then the story started coming through for me. So then I started looking for other games that were RPG. Basically, Final Fantasy 4 shaped the kind of games I wanted to play, and no, most of my first actual purchases myself, they're all based on Final Fantasy 4 because I just love that game. But then after 6 hours, and I think I got fucked up by the antlion at that point, and I think that's when Edward started coming along, and he started being a pansy ass bitch, and I think I just switched off to another game, even though I really liked it. And one of the games I ended up eventually staggering onto was my next entry in the list, Final Fantasy VII. Now this is why I always say this is my first Final Fantasy, because it's the one that I actually played from start to finish, and this was the first game that had me hook, line and sinker. From opening to credits, I did not put that game down. In fact, it was remarkable. This was probably the 80th game in that I just played very flippantly, just sort of shoved it in. I don't think I even started reading the text. I was that bad coming into gaming. I didn't even read the text, but then certain characters like Aerith and Tifa and Sid and Yuffie started coming through, and then I started caring about the plot. So I restarted the game thinking this time I'm gonna pay attention to it. And that's what Final Fantasy VII did for me. 4 gave me the taste for fantasy and RPGs. FF7 made me care about them. It was the first game that I ever felt emotionally connected to the characters. Not what was just going on the surface, on the superficial level, but actually caring what the characters' backstories were. What made these people who they are? What have been their experiences, their hardships? And I got so invested in this, what at the time seemed to me a masterpiece, even though we are talking probably around about the year 2000 at this point. Like Final Fantasy X was rocking the show, like PS2 graphics were looking shit, and here I was still getting my mind blown by Final Fantasy VII. But anyway, moving on to the next title, I wasn't actually planning on turning this into a review for every Final Fantasy. The next one I played was 8. Straight after 7, I was like, yep, give me some more of that shit. I want to gobble me up some more of those feels, and I was probably about 11 at this point, so I skipped straight on to FF8, and that did not disappoint in the slightest. I mean, I will admit, FF7 had been such a huge experience for me, and I kind of explained this in the video why FF7 meant so much to me, and sort of my upbringing and a load of cheesy ass crap like that. I did that video, so it was going to be impossible for anything to... Oh, look at the Dogos. Oh. It was basically impossible for anything to break actually above the shadow that FF7 had created. Nothing was going to break through that. But FF8 got damn close. Not only did the combat system, which is often the most criticized point of FF8, resonate with me a hell of a lot, it was the depth of story that in FF8. Even to this day, it still blows my mind how fleshed out, intricate, and just damn dramatic the plot of Final Fantasy VIII is. It was absolutely mind-boggling for me to understand this story, and that's why I played FF8 back-to-back twice. And shit, even to this day, there's still loads of FF8 that I'm still learning now. Like, I find that whenever I do theories, FF8 is always the one that it's just a plethora of twisted, crazy story that really offers its well to theory crafting. And that was how I got this at the young age of, I think I'm 11 or 12 at this point, the theory crafting, the theory juices. And it was another layer on top of what FF7 had brought me, which was caring about the story, caring about the plots. Now with FF8, it was about exploring it. Next game up on my list, this is a horrible one to have to admit, but basically this was about a year into my gaming life. I'd already established that I was a weeb and the old JRPG was my kind of shit. I think that's when I first ever started watching anime, my first few anime episodes, and I went to the store, I bought a PS2, I was like, I want to get involved in some of this gaming shit. I don't want to be playing these old ass retro games no more. What's the most current, best looking Final Fantasy today? No, unfortunately for me, because I'm a bit of a twat, it was Final Fantasy X-2. X-2 at this point was the latest Final Fantasy, and I walked into a game store and it was on sale, and I thought, yep, I'll buy that, because I've been told with Final Fantasy games you don't have to play them all to understand they're self-contained, but of course that's against 6 to 7 to 8, not 10 to 10-2, so yes, I'm one of those arseholes, those idiots who played X-2 before he played 10. And needless to say, so I got this fresh new X-2, it's got YRP on the front. I walk into it and holy shit did I hate it. Fucking hated the game. I mean, it was catastrophic. Now before you hit the dislike button if you disagree with that, you'll have to listen to the rest of the story to know when I then went on to replay it, and to this day I think it's around about my 4th favourite Final Fantasy. But so I played X-2, played it only about halfway, didn't know what the hell was going on. Not a damn clue. And considering how crazy FF10 is, I had it coming. To me. So I went back and I played Final Fantasy X. So that was the next on my list. Final Fantasy X. Probably getting up to something like 13 now, because I'm playing a lot of other stuff. I pulled a tiny bit, only about 15 hours in FF11 back in the day, even if it was just like Crystal Chronicles on my mate's GameCube. Like, I tried loads of different bits, but I went back, I played 10. Damn dude, I did. This was the title that kind of solidified me as a full-blown Final Fantasy fan. Because like I said, 4 had brought the fantasy taste, FF7 had made me care about JRPGs, 8 had made me explore them, and then it was 10 that was the emotion, the emotional connection of the journey. All of these things, they're like tears to Final Fantasy enlightenment. And Final Fantasy X, it was the one that made me care about the relationship between the team. And that was more than just Yuno and Tidus' journey. That was Riku, Waka, Lulu, the entire team dynamic. It was like the 4th of the 5 ultimate levels of Final Fantasy. The 5th was also delivered to me by Final Fantasy X, and that was the music, the songs, the soundtracks. This was something I was previously blind to, and I always have to ask, before the age of 13 when I played this game, did I have ears? Because I just disregarded music. I think sometimes the main reason for that is because I wasn't really allowed to game. I was brought up by grandparents. I was one of those people who I wanted to play until 2 in the morning, so I would play, and then when I heard my grandparents getting out of bed, I would quickly turn off the TV, which had been on mute as I was playing, and then I'd hide beneath the covers, wait for them to go, sometimes get busted, have a real good bollocking for being caught playing games at like 2 in the morning. It's a school day. So that's why I think I had it on mute so much, so I was trying to sneak from my parents. But by the time I was 13, I was actually allowed to game beyond midnight, beyond bedtime, and that's when I actually started listening to the music. So that's when the 5th tier came in, of just being absolutely blown away by the music. And I feel that's what kind of went hand in hand with really feeling and caring about the characters in Final Fantasy X and who they were, because they all had their own themes. It really made me, and it was a standout moment for me in gaming, when it really made me realize how much the music adds to the story, adds to what you take away with it, and even just your whole perception of who the characters are and the dynamics between them. It's kind of trippy and weird to say that music could do that, but hell did it do it for me. So moving on to the next one. God damn, this could be forever. So I played Final Fantasy X, then I didn't actually go and finish 10-2, which was kind of my original plan. I kind of got sidewinded into going back to Final Fantasy 4. Like I said, I decided by this point, yep, Final Fantasy is my jam, I want to play all of them, so I might as well start from the beginning, but I don't want to start from the very beginning, like Final Fantasy 1 to 3, come now, they do look a bit janky. The text of the story, I mean, this is terrible. That's the perception I had. I still haven't played them to this day, so I blame it on that. So I wanted to play an old one, but not too old, you get me? So I went back and I finished Final Fantasy 4, and that's when I realized I'm about 14, 15 at this point. Wasted so many years, and probably my biggest regret is between sort of the PS2 and PS3 era, I barely played any games on these consoles. I mean, I seriously crippled my variety, my understanding, my taste, or evolved my taste. I kind of halted it by playing nothing but MMOs. I literally sunk so many years, and I'm talking years, into playing just RuneScape, World of Warcraft, then League of Legends with my mate, other MOBAs, maybe a bit of the old Wolfenstein, Call of Duty games, but mostly I would be off on my fucking torrent hunter, trolling people and scamming people in RuneScape, and I regret it so much. I limited myself as a gamer so badly, and that's why there's so many games now that as I'm sort of becoming more of an evolved, or at least I'm trying to evolve my taste, I'm doing a hell of a lot of catching up on games that you guys, the original Niers, the original Persona games, God of War games, Assassin's Creed games, like loads of franchises that Tales being another one that I just missed out on because I just played these goddamn online games. But while I was super addicted by all of that, I still kept coming into the Final Fantasy series. So the next on the list was Final Fantasy 4, played that, and it became like another glorious chess piece in the board of my Final Fantasy experience that I've been building, because this was the Final Fantasy that I really feel and maintain to this day taught me the essence of Final Fantasy, the feel, the vibe, the music, the most classic of classic turn-based combat systems, classic monsters, crystals, summons, the most epic traditional taste of a Final Fantasy story. And even now when I look back on that game, if I have to say what is the most Final Fantasy, me, I'm going to say 4. And it was then this game that made me start wanting to know about the franchise's history. This is when I started wanting to know, who are these directors? Who are these musicians? No, I don't think I even knew up until this point that Square Enix was the actual developer. Oh, Squaresoft. Squaresoft. I didn't know who the developer was, the directors, any of the kind of history or what goes into these. So I feel like Final Fantasy 4 at this point, I was playing an older game, even though I had just recently gone out and bought a flashy new console and was trying to get into modern gaming again. It made me actually really interested and care about the subject of gaming, the actual topic, finding out really interesting, cool stuff on the internet about it. You know, forums then started coming through, social media. The snowball was building to the ultimate crystal weeb of Chaos Pez. So moving on to the next ones. What did I play next? Holy crap, what did I play after 4? No, I remember. It was Final Fantasy IX because I really loved the medieval theme in Final Fantasy IV. And I kind of looked at 9 ages ago, and I'll say the reason why I hadn't played 9 till this point, 7, 8, and then I didn't play 9. The reason I didn't follow that sequence is 9 really didn't look good to me. I still remember it now, and it's so weird because now when I look at 9, it's nothing but sort of bulging hearts just flashing at my eyes. Then at the instant I catch a glimpse of Garnet, I'm away, I'm happy. I smile, I light up inside. But back in the day when I looked at it, they kind of looked deformed and chibi and weird. And I don't know why, I just didn't like the look of it. So I kind of skirted around 9 oddly. After 4, I wanted some more of that medieval goodness. Classic fantasy mixed with medieval, and 9 looked like it offered that. So I played that, and yep, once again I was converted. And this time the conversion was more on a philosophical level. I kind of covered this in a 9 video. I did recently a Garland theory. I kind of spoke about how 9, what resonated most because the combat system didn't really stand out to me that amazingly. The cinematics, cutscenes, and the overall story did. Especially the world exploration. I've got to say, the overworld map was really enjoyable and actually exploring the world. I think 9 was, out of all of the games, one of the ones where I went more off the beaten track and took more of the time to do some of the optional content and dive a bit more into the lore, sort of the backstory. But the significant standout was, like I said, that more philosophical thinking. You know, thinking about the meaning of life, death, reincarnation, where do we go, our purpose, our significance, which, you know, is FF9 is really supposed to drive to you, what with Necron, with VV. The entire concept being built around a soul. And I was kind of at that nice age where my brain was able to process those kind of things on a bit of a deeper level. Actually, you know, bring it in and make me consider life, just life in general, to consider the things, the universe. That was also when I first smoked weed. I'm joking, it wasn't. But next was FF12. No, I'm not, you notice I'm not saying how I played all of these games, like what I played them on. I will make a confession. Sometimes I haven't always played them on a console. Sometimes I have played them on the PC and they haven't already been ported to that device. I won't... Don't pirate. I ran a few emulators back in the day, I'll admit it, but I always paid up. I always paid. Maybe not directly for that game on that system, but I've got to say, whenever I have done that in the past, I've always gone out and purchased something Square Enix related, even if it's another guidebook that I've already got, just a more modern one, or a new version of a game, just some bit of bullshit just to give Square Enix some money and clear my conscience. There you go, gave you money for it, don't be fucking ungrateful, it's your fault anyway that you haven't ported it yet, you buggers. So next I play Final Fantasy 12 on the PC. Kind of might have screwed my experience by not playing it in the absolute best way possible, but still it was one hell of an experience. I gotta say, Final Fantasy 12 was the first Final Fantasy when I started it. I really thought, oh, I hate the layout. I hate the layout of this sort of open world, which is bizarre to me now because it's one of the ones I love the most. And I've actually said, if Final Fantasy 7, if I got to choose the world format of the 7 remake, I'd pick for it to be something 12-like. And even Nomura has hinted at it being 12-like. But back in the day, just didn't like it, didn't get on well with it. But as I went through it, it totally flipped. And it was actually became one of the strongest points. And what I love about 12 now, immersive. You know, you've actually got the monsters there, you see them interact. And just having them on the screen like that, and the encounters were rough. I've got to say, 12 was rough to get through. If you got into the middle of the zone, you could get long potions. Like, deep in the Golomor jungle, or the fucking Yongyen Sansi, whatever the hell is it called? PTSD. But some of those zones were savage, and it kind of brought that wild, dangerous kind of feel to Final Fantasy. And with the huge effort that the FF12 team had gone through to make this world feel steeped in history, steeped in its variety and its culture, especially with all the different races just intermingling there in the cities, regaling their tales, sharing their own stories of adventure through this grand Final Fantasy world. It also, just like every other Final Fantasy, added a significant notch to my interests, and that was political. FF12 is such a hotbed of power struggles and political plays. Balance the twos, the throws, the pulls of monarchies versus parliamentary rules and what's democratic. It kind of dove into all of that. And it was a significant moment in my life because around the age of about 14, 15, I'm really screwing these ages up, I can't remember exactly. That's when I first started learning what right wing was, what left wing was, what liberal was. I started taking interest in the political stage. So Final Fantasy 12, it contributed another huge aspect to who I am. But next is the Marmite. I played it. I actually held off. I remember the game stores. You couldn't walk to a game store and it wasn't there. And I remember watching these trailers with wide eyes thinking, oh, when that comes, I'm going to play it. And then like an idiot, and I always resent that I allowed this to happen. People put me off getting it. So I had a few very opinionated mates who are just clearly, and I look back on now, and the fact that I ever took their advice on something like a JRPG or even just an RPG, considering they're really 2D surface level kind of gamers. I don't mean to say that in a superior way. You can tell the kind of people who just don't have an RPG or JRPG bone in their damn body. And then these were the kind, they told me don't get FF13, it's terrible, the game that I'd been kind of waiting for. So I didn't get it, but I did when I was 17 and played it, and I'm gonna say it didn't add anything brand new or fresh to me as a person, this particular title, but it sure as hell enhanced it. So my interest in lore and characterization was stronger at this point than ever, and I really feel that even to this day, Final Fantasy 13 is absolutely one of the most juicy games you can play, beyond just being visually beautiful, absolutely staggering, the visuals. And for me, I never gave an absolute shit, not one iota of a crap about the linearity. Honestly, never even crossed my mind. So after I finished 13, I saw all these complaints about linearity. It was quite, I admit, it was quite disheartening. It took me aback because all I remember was being blown away by the scenery of this game. And when you actually take your time to look and you stare at some of that scenery, some of the colors, some of the horizons that they've got going on, I found my entire journey through this game breathtaking visually, especially on the world front. So to hear people were walking around those corridors and they found them boring, it was mind-blowing to me. How could you have been bored in such a beautiful world? Now I kind of understand why. I think a lot of gamers definitely fall into the trap of being quite lazy, impanning their cameras, and unless it's kind of thrown in their face. I mean, that's not to say it's not genuine, the complaints about the linearity. It was linearity, you know, FF10 got away with it, but the linearity was so obvious because there were no towns, there were no cities, there were no NPCs, there was no side quests to do it, and that's what I loved actually about it. I'm not really kind of a quest guy if I have the choice to do story. If there's quests there, I'll do them, but if I had a choice between doing a quest or spending that hour balls deep with my back up against a wall on the run being chased with the super boss with 15 Gatling guns and a sword coming at me, or just being betrayed by some god or snaked into some sort of villainous scheme, yeah, I'd rather do that. And that's what I loved about Final Fantasy 13. It was the intensity. You really felt like fugitives on the run. If you ever stopped for even a moment at Hope's dad's house or Nautilus, the theme park, you had soldiers on you. People were scared of you. The game didn't come up for air or to surface once. All out metal to the pedal, and with that faster combat system, this is when I started getting interested a bit more into action-orientated games. This was also the year that I found out the Final Fantasy fan base, a portion of it, are a bunch of diabolical assholes. Not really, no, actually, no, kind of really. I had a field day with 13 because I feel anyone who's interested in really tackling and getting in the ring with a difficult to understand story, like they like the challenge of piecing and following a really complicated plot. I actually found a flavour and a taste for it. And again, it's the same with characterization. What I learned from 8, what I learned from 10 was trying to understand what was going on beyond just the surface, beyond just what people say and do and act and think. Sometimes there's a whole load of other shit, you know, even past stuff in childhood that can build people up to who they are today. And the Final Fantasy cast were just a hotbed of mess and problems and childhood and experienced trauma. No, Lightning has daddy issues. No, she literally does. They say that the reason she hates Snow is because he reminds Lightning of her real father. Too laid back, carefree, kind of unreliable and spontaneous in the moment, whereas Odin is more like the father figure Lightning wanted, and so she actually sees Odin like a father figure. And it was kind of stuff like that. No, like the reason why Lightning punched Snow, or the reason why Hope was outlashing so what seemed to be completely unreasonably. Vanille? Oh no, she was a character who, no, she looks like a dumb bitch on the surface, but She was such an awesome character to explore and go from that transition of thinking she's this dumb ditz to holy cow, she's like one of the smartest in this entire team. And you know what, I'm going to call that the 6th tier of Final Fantasy Ascension. The 6th tier, juiciness. Juiciness, and FF13 had plenty of juiciness, at least in my opinion. And then from there I knocked out 6. I was actually waiting for the 13-2 to come over to the PC. I went back and I played 6, loved it. But as you guys know, this isn't a Final Fantasy I rave about. It's one of the ones where I objectively look at Final Fantasy 6 and I say, does this deserve the best Final Fantasy score? Which it has, and it has always maintained for, well, basically since it was ever out, it's always had the best Final Fantasy score. I look at its story, I look at its characterization, its music, what it brought to the table at the time, I say, yep, this does deserve it. It deserves to be held just in as high regards as it is. But me personally, I was quite old at this point. I'd played a hell of a lot more games at this point. So Final Fantasy VI, it wasn't a totally life-changing experience. That's why I don't think I hold it in quite as high regards. But when you look back on the story of what I've said about the others and what they kind of did and changed me as a person, that's the kind of level of regard I hold those other games. So for 6 to be coming in, and all I can say is it was a fucking amazing game. Loved it, loved the characters. You know, it seems kind of underwhelming. I have nothing grand for 6, but still a strong place. Still a strong place. So next I played 13-2, was blown to bits, one of my favourite Final Fantasies to date. So the port finally came out, I played it. I won't go into too much detail because this video is already long enough, but the characters of 13-2 became my favourite cast. Absolutely favourite cast. And it was the first ever Final Fantasy that I was so sold on. Everything about it improved. Bits of the combat system that I didn't like from 13, fixed them up. It broke down the walls of the linearity and gave us a genuinely intriguing world to explore, even though that was done in a kind of puzzle-like format with games, with areas being locked behind certain timelines, and you had to go to certain timelines and figure them out in a very specific order. And I didn't like puzzle games at this point, so like I've said before, I didn't think I liked 13-2, but the music, oh yeah, it was the music. The music was the most experimental, crazy, wacky, should not work in any kind of mix together soundtrack. It had rap, it had hip-hop, it had rock, it had kind of trance disco-like music, it had your big glorious orchestral themes with choirs and grand crescendos. The soundtrack was absolutely on point. It was also the Final Fantasy for me and Caius Ballad that took villains up to another level. This was where I kind of learned about that motto that really resonated. Two mottos really. Two mottos that I love when it comes to villains. Nothing is either good or bad, only thinking makes it so, the Versus 13 one. I think that's a fantastic quote. And I love the idea behind villains, that villains in villains' minds, they're not villains. Unless you're like Kefka, in which case you know you're villain and you fucking love it. But in most cases, they don't see themselves as the villains. And most of the JRPGs and RPGs, they'd fallen a lot into the kind of cliche villain camps, or I wouldn't say that because Seymour Guado definitely came out of that, but more put it in your face that villains have their own backstories. And with Caius Ballad, the second quote that I love is, you either die a hero or live long enough to see yourself become a villain. And that was what Caius Ballad's story was, and it was a level of tragedy. It made me like relate to a villain more than ever. So it was like another little gem added by Final Fantasy to me as a person, what I look for in a villain. It changed, evolved my tastes, and yeah, it just blew me away. I could talk more about these goddamn games all day until the cows come home. But moving swiftly on, I then switched over to, so I played some other games in the meantime. I went on to Final Fantasy 14. I'm getting quite old at this point. Versus 13 is around and I've got my eyes on it. I mean, that's been actually around for a while at this point. And I'm getting kind of excited about that. And it was in the mainline series. I was going to say it was Lightning Returns, but I didn't. Between 13-2 and Lightning Returns, I was waiting for the port again. I actually played Final Fantasy V for the first time. FF5. I mean, the game is so crap in some places. Especially on the X-Death front. I always say X-Death, terrible villain, so cliche, sounds so cheesy, corny, uninterested, no real backstory. Come at me, X-Death lovers, sorry. And there was a hell of a lot of other little flaws with FF5, and yet somehow I ended up loving all of them. It's kind of like with FF4, I flipped my mindset completely because I went from this person who overanalyze everything, every character and what's going on with them there, and like I said about 13-2 with villains, for me to then go from that, no, I want my villains to be on another level, to then FF5, you can see the really jarring jump. And yet somehow I didn't dislike this game. In fact, I actually liked it more than 6. I place this really high up on my list. I place this around kind of 6th and 7th. I know Ray Chase says it's number 1. I love that. I love it when I see people whose favourite Final Fantasy is 5 because I feel like it deserves a lot of love. Or that I want it to be loved, because the whole story with Faris and Galoof, who was an absolute lad, Bart's and the team, it was such a light-hearted, fun game most of the way through that when it did throw you the tragedies and the curveballs, they really hit home, they really struck. But the thing I love most about FF5 and why I ended up going back to playing 10-2 next after this, or I think it was after Lightning Returns, is because of the job classes, the job class system. Oh boy, did I have a merry time playing that. I love job classes. I love them. Dark Knights, Bards, Berserkers, Red Mages, White Mages, Black Mages, Samurais, Paladins, all of that good shit. I love it. Give it to me. Yummy in my tummy. And that was the Final Fantasy that I ended up just going into it literally just to fight around and configure stuff and play with all the cool classes and different team compositions. So Final Fantasy V gave me a real love for combat system, even though it's retro as shit at this point. Then I did play Lightning Returns next, because that then came out. And throughout Lightning Returns, I maintained my hankering for job classes. But Lightning Returns came out, was amazing. Yep, I'm going to say it was amazing. I know there's loads of people going to hit the dislike button now, because Lightning Returns is shit and terrible, right? I couldn't disagree more. The story was on point. I even got to admit I loved the dressing up. I like dressing Lightning. As girly as that sounds, I loved it. I love customizing it. I love the story. I love the bringing back of the characters. And the thing with Lightning Returns is I'd play 2 other iterations. I'd built up such a personal connection and relationship to the characters in 13 and 13-2, and a genuine intrigue for the Fabula Nova Crystallis lore, that by the time Lightning Returns came around, every time even Noel Christ appeared, or Snow reappeared, or Caius Ballard, it was this exhilarating, over-exaggerated, like, yeah, kind of moment. So for the whole of Lightning Returns, it was just all these amazing throwbacks and a genuinely really interesting story. And by the time the credits rolled on Lightning Returns, which was the second game I went full completionist on, another part of that is I did actually generally enjoy the combat system. Also, I really loved the much wider terrains that they had for you to explore in Lightning Returns. Like, you had your main areas just like Luxarian or the Highlands and the desert, and a lot of the themes that went with that were absolutely incredible, especially Desert Lullaby from Lightning Returns. That was one of those songs for me where you get so addicted to it, you're listening to it like 20 times a day. It was kind of got to that the level of addiction got that bad. But Lightning Returns, by the time I finished it, it was one of the most emotional endings ever, simply because of how long I had followed this FF13 saga. And finish off this video because my internet just went down for an hour. What the hell is this? You Ugandan internet in the 1980s. So finally, Lightning Returns 5, 6, 7, 8, 4. I haven't played I played a bit of 3, a quarter, I was going to say a quarter. It's less than that. It's about 5, 6 hours. I've still got 1 and 2 to play. Yeah, I think that's pretty much the whole batch. I would shout out to 14. Played that up to level 56. So I had a real stint of about 40, 50 hours on FF14. And I love that. I mean, but back in the day, I used to be such an MMO player. I just wish I had more time. I know that's quite an oxymoron considering. And I'm probably using the word oxymoron wrong there. 99% sure, considering that I'm a YouTuber in the Final Fantasy games. I have all the time in the world, but you'd be surprised. So FF14, that MMO is tight. That MMO is bang tidy. Nothing more else I need to say about that. And then finally, of course, Final Fantasy 15. Now, one little offshoot game that I will shout out before I played, obviously 15, was Type 0. I'm one of those people I bought Type 0 for Type 0. It was at that point when there was putting the FF15 demo. And no, Type 0 is, I've explained the story, I won't go into why I love that. I think most of you know by now why I love Type 0 so much, but holy crap did that shit piss me off. Like, Type 0 came out and everyone was just saying, I only bought it for the 15 demo, don't know what this crappy PSP shit that's attached to it, I didn't even want it, and kind of the whole PSP and Type 0 got thrown under the bus. Like, for most people, they didn't even play Type 0. If they did, they looked at it and they just thought it was hideous because it's a PSP game with some bad voice acting, so of course it looked absolutely shit. It didn't scale well, even though on the PSP that game was a phenomenal success. Now, most of you know that is one of my favorite Final Fantasy of all time, but skipping over that, Final Fantasy 15, that is of course the last one I played in the mainline series. Still playing it today, still probably paying it for another 2 years based on this DLC structure. And you know, with 15, it's been a long story. I've had ups with this franchise or specific game. I can see the dogs fucking each other up. They're just waiting. Well, I have to finish the video, guys. So yeah, I played 15. It was a bit of all right. Loved it. Some of the DLC went a bit shit. 15 A New Empire, don't know where that shit came from. And that I've got to say, out of all of the things with Final Fantasy 15, you guys know I came away from the main story loving it. You know, I've waded through all the shit like you guys have with people who dislike it for very, I'm going to say, fair reasons. No fleshing out issues. Definitely some worrying departures from the original. I can definitely see that there's constructive reasons not to like 15, but for me, I've explained why that experience, because I followed it over this entire journey of me, you know, playing these Final Fantasy games since I was 10 years old, and Versus 13 followed me for a huge portion. It's got a very soft place in my heart. Very soft, and while there's definitely been some hiccups in the road, I don't at all have any disappointments with 15, even where it is now. You know, no, that's not to say would I have liked all of these, the DLC structure to be less inflated, would have I liked more in the original game? Would I personally have liked it to be more Fabula Nova Crystallis and Versus 13? You guys know I've said it, honestly, openly, yes. But you know, I've explained why I loved FNC so much, was excited for this to be another entry in that universe. But it's been a mad year. I've got to go. The dogs are still scratching. So happy 30 years of Final Fantasy. I'm probably going to be late in getting this for the actual 30 years, but happy 30 years, Final Fantasy fans! Happy 30 years! Blessings to all of you. Share your stories, because that's what the point of this video is for. Share your favourite Final Fantasy stories below. What order did you play in? And more just anything, what were the games that shaped you the most? And in what ways did they shape you? Now, I've kind of gone through my list, and even mind-blowing to me when you actually sit down and think about just how significant those games might have been on influenced the way you thought or looked at things or shaped your gaming tasting in general. Final Fantasy has been a huge one for me. I mean, shit, that does not even cover it. For me personally, like, before I even started this YouTube channel and made a career out of this somehow, I still don't know how. Like, I'm not joking, guys. It's just as bamboozling to me, like the position I'm in now. I've got like a Dissidia project. I've got a friend working with me. Now all of the experience and generosity that I've seen from you guys, it's all just... still hasn't set in, for sure. Still hasn't set in. So, you know, with Final Fantasy, what it shaped for me when it was just a hobby, but for me specifically, now that it's actually shaped my career and helped me to achieve more than I could have ever actually have dreamed of. Like, this is a culmination of all the things I ever wanted to do. I wanted to talk about games. I wanted to talk to people. Shit, I even studied drama in GCSE and A-level, so there's even a part of wanting to be a bit of a performer. Regale your tales in the comment section below. Until the next video. Go hounds! Go! 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 Yeah, I knew you would. I knew you would. Give me that attitude. Go!